On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome, everybody, inside the Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an undisclosed Institute of Higher Learning. This is The Jake Feinberg Show, and we're happy you could all be part of the program today. I was still a young man when I was working at Tower Records following a stint at Boston University in the late 90s, when I came across a compact disc of a band that seemed to fit inside the Jake Feinberg pocket. Nice melodies, contrapuntal piano techniques, power horns, and the funk drumming. It was harder soul than the Temps and more modal than the Brubeck Desmond Garibaldi Jader Jazz across the bay. The band had infectious hooks, polyrhythmic percussion, and messages that spoke to the changing dynamic of cities and the soul circuit of music as a conduit to magic. My guest's drumming chops came from his work with Tower of Power, but it also came in the form of Jack's on Sutter, the Visidero, Jimbo's Bop City, the El Matador, the Black Saint in Oakland, and all his pocket trap buddies, Eddie Moore, Gaylord Birch, Mike Clark, Eddie Marshall, Dick Burke, Gregorico, and Jerry Grinelli. Being able to play live for nights at a time in Japantown with some sticky sake and udon noodles next to Chester Thompson's ambidextrous organ, Greg Adams' trumpet, or Lenny Williams' urban renewal of the Oakland Stroke. San Francisco gets all the pub, but Oaktown is the gritty, dirty, scrappy stepbrother who overperforms and outmaneuvers its more glitzy neighbor. Don't change horses in midstream because the hot bet is on the boogie-down East Bay grease that cooked the stew of Sly Stone, the Fillmore District, and Eastside San Jose. My guest today is in the same master drumming discussion as the aforementioned cats, as well as Mickey Roker, Lenny White, Bernard Purdy, and Jim Keltner. He has the chops to play in any musical setting because he can feel and is sensitive to the bump city that might be on the 1-3 or the 2-4, or a quick hop skip over to the BART station to learn some drumming techniques from the Birds on Hippie Hill. He's open to playing if the music is good, just like Taj Mahal or Sam Lay or Michael White. He's open to painting the rhythm and hue because, let's face it, the book's still being written. David Garibaldi, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. That's pretty cool. You got me in there with Mickey Roker. That's pretty good.
Yeah, Roke. When Dizzy said that with Roker he could fly to France and come back, and Mickey was still keeping time.
That's cool.
Tell me though, I mean, a little bit about did you know guys like Billy Vitt and some of these other, it's just amazing to me the propensity of soul drummers that were coming out of the Bay Area, and I was just kind of hoping to talk to you a little bit about your allegiances early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill Vitt, I remember him. Also, Gaylord. There was a bunch of different guys. Mike Clark, Harvey Hughes was another one. Harvey was a really killer drummer. He lives in Las Vegas right now. Gregorico, who was a very good friend, and he was one of my heroes, with Sly and all that. And there was just a lot of really great, drummers and stuff here in the Bay Area that had kind of their own sort of vibe. There was the Oakland sound. There was Marvin Holmes and the Uptights. There was another band called Ulysses Crockett and the Funk Machine.
Oh man!
There was the Spiders. The Spiders were really cool. They were a bunch of young East Bay dudes. They were really, really, really great, with great singing, great singer named Dennis Delacqua. And so, that was just, there was another guy too, that when I first started coming, his name was Jimmy Cicero, and he had a trio and a great drummer named Ray Cotton. So there was like just tons of really, really cool stuff around here that, influenced all of us.
And I've interviewed Mike, Clark, Grinelli, Enrico, Roker. I've interviewed over 300 cats that were, performing before I was born, which was 1978. And I'm fascinated with the regionalism of it. So, I really believe like Oakland was kind of like the little brother to San Francisco, but yet there was so much soul coming out of there. How do you account for all that? Was it just the idea of a lot of African Americans coming to work at the ports out there, and then eventually the Panther movement? I mean, break it down, because this is before my time, and this is a lineage for your baby and for all the other cats out there.
Well, I mean, that's hard to say. The music scene in the Bay Area has always been, very integrated. Always, people of color mixing. It was like a rainbow kind of. It was just everybody was working together. I mean, that's what I remember coming up. It was always like that. There was never any sort of racial issues. There may have been, and definitely was in other parts of society here, but as far as the musicians, it was a place that was safe for everyone. You could come and enjoy each other and share ideas, and that's what it was. It was just really, really cool. I remember when I first came back from the military, it was 1969, late 1969. I started working around the Bay Area, and one of the first people I met was Mike Clark and Paul Jackson. And, they were like they were already a team. Mike was a really accomplished player, even in those days. I mean, he went on to become, a great jazz drummer, but he was already that when I met him. I mean, he could do all the funk and he can do all the other stuff, but his jazz thing was really outstanding. And then Paul, of course, I remember, when I met him, he had this little sweater on with the little elbow patches and stuff, and he's like this really nerdy sort of a dude, and but those guys were really, really cool. And Mike and I used to be in this band together. We sort of shared the drum chair, got it fired in and out of it. It was called the Reality Sandwich.
Oh my! Where are the tapes of this stuff? I mean, this is what I'm craving.
I don't know, man. That was that was like an East Bay sort of a deal, and we played at this club in Oakland, down on a place called Jack London Square. The club was called the On Broadway, where the tower went on to. We used to do every Tuesday night there. We had a gig, and where we started, kind of a regular in town gig where everybody used to come and hang and jam and all that stuff. And that's where I met the Tower guys, too. There was a couple Tower guys that used to come and sit in with the Reality Sandwich Band, and Skip Mesquite and Mick Gillette. And they one night came in and asked me if I was interested in coming to check out their band. I'd never heard of them, Tower Power. And so I went and checked them out. And, of course, it was typical of the bands I grew up hearing, horns, playing funky soul music. It didn't matter what color you were, so it was in the air here, there was funk music, there was Latin music, great jazz, rock. So you got all this kind of real mix of things that you grew up hearing, it was everywhere.
Well, I remember Mike talking about the idea when he was approached by Herbie to go with the Headhunters. He was conflicted because he was making such a good living playing live, and the propensity of live venues. I mean, I don't even know if you played at Gigogu or any of these. I was making a point about Udon Noodles before, but I'm talking about Garibaldi pre-Tower of Power. I mean, you were able to make a living because of the opportunity to play live. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there was a lot of places to play. That was how you at that time, that was how you made music. You played in the clubs. You played, you did what was available. There wasn't a big road scene. It was all regional. It was local. There was all this local stuff going on, and guys would come to each other's gigs.
And that's what I'm saying. So it was a community, and I'm what I'm getting at is like you can go across the board with horn players or drummers. I mean, anyone from Elvin Jones to David Garibaldi. I'm trying to say, well, how the heck did all these guys develop their own individual sounds?
Because that's the way that everybody did it in those days. The thing that is different from then versus today is there wasn't all this media to look at. There was no YouTube. There wasn't video.
Mm-hmm.
There was only records and then, audio tape. So the only way that you learned how to play was by listening to the recordings. And then eventually, if you were fortunate enough to see them come through town, the drummers that you liked, which was, kind of rare. So you were sort of left to your own devices. Well, what is this dude doing? What is he doing here? You didn't get to see them play. So you had to use your imagination to sort of develop, how these people were playing. And that turned into kind of your own personal statement. There was like, Willie Sparks, who was with Graham Central Station. There was Sam Cox. He was another great drummer in Oakland there. Harvey Hughes, Sandy McKee with Cold Blood. I mean, all these cats, and Mike, every one of them had their own sort of vibe, and it was really, really good.
I'm going to have to transcribe that quote because that's spot on. I mean, it was, and the same thing was going on in all these pockets of the country. I brought up Sam Lay, that was Paul Butterfield's drummer, Roker back on the East Coast. And, it didn't matter if it was Tony Williams. I mean, when I interviewed Cosby, he talked about being able to go into a club, or actually, listening to a record, and going and just putting a blindfold on, and he could tell you who the drummer was based on their style. Whereas,
that's true.
And that's the problem today is that, and there's so many technically proficient cats in Tucson and anywhere else, but they don't. I wonder if it's just. Is it only? Can you chalk it up to just the saturation of material that's out there? Is that the only reason that we're sort of having a hard time developing these kind of individual people, or is it just because guys like Paul Jackson and Garibaldi, Mike Clark, and let's face it, the Titans like McCoy and Wayne Shorter and Lee Morgan, they just don't come around every day?
Well, it's the nature of the beast. I mean, there's so much media out there. There's a lot of emulation going on. Everybody wants to play like everybody else. Everybody wants to play like their heroes, But still, like the cream rises to the top. There's still always going to be really, really great, unique players. There always will be. You just have to, kind of look for them. I think that when I was growing up here, there wasn't that, the big media explosion where you could see anybody play, anybody you wanted. All you got to do is just, turn on your computer and there they are. It didn't exist.
Right. Exactly. I love, and I'm sort of in a fantasy world about that.
It didn't exist. And so how we learned here was we went and watched the guys that we liked. I watched all our friends play, and then we would hang out. We'd get together. I mean, Harvey Hughes and I used to get together at my place in Oakland, and we'd hang and we'd play. We'd just play all day, and exchange ideas. One guy would sit at the drum set while the other guy would say, well, why don't you move your hand over here? Why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? And then we'd kind of tag team on the drum set all day. We'd sit there and, give each other little, challenges to try to invent something. And we came up with some of the most nasty, cool-sounding grooves and beats. And it was just, a collective mind that was going on. Everybody wanted to be their own person. And, I remember my early years in Tower, if somebody came up to me and said, wow, yeah, man, it's really, really cool. You sounded like, that was like, I was looking for the razor blades after that, man. I just couldn't, I just like, what did I do wrong is what I thought.
Right.
Because I just never wanted to be a copy. I never wanted to remind anyone of anything other than what I was doing, And I think all the drummers that were around here were, exactly that.
It's interesting. You brought up. It's a really good point. It took me a long time as a journalist to understand why that would be offensive. Might be the wrong word, but you sound like now when I hear people say, "Well, yeah, this band sounds like," I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear what it sounds. I want to hear something completely unique and something completely different. And we talk about the brotherhood and the community. David, the question is though, Tower of Power is a perfect example. There were many different amalgamations of the band, but you go through Tower of Power, or you look at Gary Bartz's bands from the East Coast, or you look at Herbie's bands, or any really tight. They were from that area. Sly Stone, they were bands. They were bands. I mean, they were communities. Whereas now it's much more focused on the. I understand, like with Tower of Power coming to the MIM, it's a special thing. But you guys were able to go as a band, whereas now it seems it's much more focused on, well, okay, Herbie's going to cost, a few grand to bring him in here, so we can only bring him in solo. And so it takes away from that team identity. I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but look at the examples that you gave of the bands. Those aren't new bands. I mean, those aren't, those aren't current, the flavor of the month people. I mean, all those bands came up in an era where that's how you made music, was in a band. That's, you got together with a group of people, you developed an identity together, you played together for years and years. That's the Tower of Power thing. I mean, we've been playing together for years. Some of us, a couple of guys in the band have been playing together since they were 15. So, it's just the era that you come up in. And I like that. I like having the same guys to play with all the time. I like looking across the stage and seeing guys that I've been playing with for, 20, 30 years. I love it, and it's like family. And I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, and there was really not anything close to the kind of musical community that we have here in the Bay Area. Now that's, not to say that there's nothing great going on there, because there certainly is. I mean, there's a level of virtuosity that is, I think, unmatched anywhere in the world with all the players that are there. It's just absolutely phenomenal. However, when I lived there, I was there for 12 years, and I was in a band called Wishful Thinking. We were the only band in town. People would come to see us because it was a novelty. We were actually a band with the same players that didn't use any subs. And so, that was a place where everybody was trying to sound like everyone else, and there was no individual. It was frowned upon, individual effort and trying to have a signature approach to your playing. That was sort of frowned upon because everybody was trying to get the same gigs, which were very generic. Now, guys like J.R. Robinson, to me, who had the ability to he has the classic recording sound. That's why he does what he does. He's the man for that, because that is his thing. That's his signature. I mean, you listen to the first major recording that he did with Michael Jackson. That's him. It's classic. And so, that's his thing. So everybody wants that. That's what everybody's trying to get. So everybody's trying to have that sort of sound, not realizing, well, JR's not manufacturing this. That's what he does. That's his thing. Just like my thing is with Tower. I remember one time in LA, some guy told me after a gig, he says, nobody plays like that anymore. He was kind of listening to what I was doing. He says, man, nobody plays that way anymore. And I said, okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. That was the anti you sound like.
Yeah. Thank you. So I just, I had to get out of there. I moved back here where at least there was some, perspective on, having a music sound, an approach to playing, I think it's different now too. I think it's different now with all the great young jazz players, the emphasis on, creative music, and the young jazz players that are out there now. It's a lot more open in that regard,
I agree, but it's interesting tracking the evolution of the. I actually have not seen the Wrecking Crew, that movie, but the LA studio scene was a mercenary scene. I mean, you you had these guys locked in. I mean, I love them. Guys that I've interviewed, like Chuck Rainey, Harvey Mason. These guys were like staples in the studio scene, but yet they were making so much dough that they could go out at night and play for free. They didn't, and so where was the room for the rest of the musicians? And then that to me seems a lot more from the zeitgeist. That's where we are flowing, where we have been flowing, is this sort of individual streak. You know, there's one person at the front, the band is in the back, and that's the one thing I love about Tower of Power. I have to read you a quote here. When I interviewed Chester Thompson, he said here, after the trio I had with Rudolph Johnson broke up, I decided to stay in San Francisco, and I was working, a young man right at the crossroads. Am I going to stay and get a square gig? Am I going to try another profession or keep at the music thing? I hung in with the music thing. I was playing with a local saxophonist, Jules Broussard, and there was a guitar player from Tower of Power who would come check me out. And it was at the time in Tower of Power when they decided they needed a keyboardist. They asked me if I'd like to do an audition. Now, in my mind, I always thought that if there was a style of music that I would play commercially, this would be it. I identified with the lyrics, I identified with the arrangements, and the harmonics. Me and a buddy of mine used to sing the lyrics to You're Still a Young Man when we were working at a bank before I joined Tower of Power. We used to sing the song. Who would have ever dreamed I would wind up playing with them? And the guitarist, by the way, was Bruce Conti. And to me, that is Tower of Power. That's a brotherhood. So, I mean, talk a little bit about those values within the band and how you guys have been able to stay together for 44 plus years.
Well, we stay together because we enjoy doing what we do. We get to do something that no one else does. We just kind of like, we have that kind of individualist, sort of approach to playing. I mean, kind of we're a product of sort of our upbringing. We came up in an era where it was respected if you had your own thing. The Bay Area was a place at the time when we came up that supported, individual effort was applauded, and having your own thing is what got you respect. That's what all our heroes had, their own thing, and so it came to that. Talk about CT. Bruce took me one night after rehearsal. He says, "Let's go. I want you to check out this organ player," and I think it was called the Off Plaza Lounge. In the city there in San Francisco.
I've never heard of that club, the Off Plaza. Cool.
The Off Plaza Lounge. Yeah. And we went in there, and CT was playing with a drummer.
Who was was it Herschel Davis was the drummer?
No, I don't remember who the drummer was.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So he's playing, it's like a duo, and they're playing like top 40 soul tunes, and CT is like playing, like all the melodies and all the horn parts and all the form of all the songs. And he's got it all arranged and everything sounding really hip and really cool. And all the current songs, he had a real current playlist. Excuse me. And then he would play, his jazz tunes too, because he was a really killer, just a great player. He could play everything. So, I met him. We invited him to come to hear our music. We were playing, or we were recording at Wally Heider's in San Francisco. That was during the Tower of Power record, the one with What Is Hip and all that stuff. And we had all the tracks finished, and we invited him over to the studio. I think we're upstairs in Studio D at Wally Heider's in San Francisco. And so we were playing. We invited him up. Their whole band came in. We invited him up, and it was kind of the surreal sort of a deal. We're listening to playback of the songs, and he had these those really dark, glasses on that kind of like on the picture of his Powerhouse album where he has like his leather jacket and his shades on and stuff. And so,
oh man, I love that album so much. Yeah.
So ahead. I know that he's we're like listening to playback, and he's got his dark glasses on, and they're really dark. He can't see in. He can see out, but we can't see in. So he's checking us all out and listening to the music and everything. And it was just a really cool thing. And he ended up saying yes. We wanted him to be in the band, and sort of he was the man. I mean, he came highly recommended. Everybody in the Bay Area who knew anything about music knew about CT, because he was just a monster player. And he was looking for, the right opportunity for himself. I mean, he's a very relaxed kind of sort of guy. He doesn't rush things. He doesn't, his decision to come in the band was something he, was well thought out. I mean, he doesn't do things impulsively, and he was just a perfect fit for us. We became, he just became part of our family. We still see him. He comes to see us play. He comes and hangs out. He subs once in a while. We're in touch with him all the time. I mean, he's somebody that'll always be with us,
And the guys that I talked to that he worked with on Jack's on Sutter, he stretched them out because he was playing these Lydian scales, these contrapuntal techniques, and just almost ambidextrous. I wanted to ask you because I'm being serious. I was a shepherd after college in the late '90s, and I picked up this God, I don't know. There was the Squib Cakes and the Oakland Stroke, that CD, and how did he change the sound? Why did you guys need? Or I guess the question is, what was your keyboard? Did you have a keyboardist before, and what did he do to change the sound of the band?
We didn't have a keyboard player.
So
it was always something. We kind of always had like kind of a master plan for the band. I mean, we never wanted to stay where we started. I mean, it was always like kind of the thought was always evolution. We always kind of were looking for the next step.
Absolutely.
And so when we decided to get a keyboard player, and we found we found CT, he was the perfect thing for us because it really meant that we could step up the kind of our level of performance. We had somebody who could really solo, but not in a blues way, a real soloist. I mean, who really had command of his instrument. He could solo over any changes. He could arrange. He could do, he could sing background vocals. I mean, the guy was he was right there. I mean, and it just made it kind of, we were all closet sort of jazz musicians too. So we were always listening to all this jazz music and funky organ trios and all that. And Bruce and I loved that kind of music. And so when we got CT to come in, sort of the vibe was like an organ trio in the middle of the larger Tower Power. So if you listen to that music that we did then, those songs, and even on that Hipper Than Hip CD that just came out, you'll hear like that kind of like vibe of organ trio in the middle of the larger ensemble, and that was kind of how we approached things.
And that's when I was writing up my monologue, I said, this is because it's not, when Chester joined the band, it went from, it fused, like you said, that jazz with the soul and the R&B, and it was just, it was a perfect tonic. And I remember just being like playing like Nerf basketball with my friends, like in the living room, and it was really my infancy of getting into music, and it was just so hip. And when you listen to East Bay Grease, for instance, it's a different sound. It's still cool. And in fact, if my engineer is ready, I'd like to queue up a track of music here, and then we'll come back and talk about
it.
Okay.
Sure, whatever you want.
You got. It's just you guys have been together for so long, and you really had that James Jamerson, that James. I don't know. Take us through it, man. That's beautiful.
Well, James Jamerson was one of Rocco's favorite bass players, and Rocco is like has a real unique ability to feel music, play with a drummer. He doesn't have very much knowledge about what he does. He's very intuitive. He could care less about, what a D minor 7 chord is and what the notes are and all that, really. And he has very kind of like unique sort of technique. It's nothing like what you get taught in school or anything like that. However, he has great ears, and he can fit himself into the music really well. And he's just like radar. So when we started playing together, it was just kind of an instant an instant relationship. I mean, we never really talk about what we do very much. We just kind of play together and listen. And I remember when I first started playing with him, I was listening to some tapes of rehearsal and stuff like that, and I noticed that when I would play on my hi-hat, he would play very tight, short staccato notes, and then I would go to my cymbal, and he would play longer notes to kind of match, the sonically what he was hearing. And I asked him one day, I said, I was listening to some tapes, man, and, I explained to him what I heard, and I said, why do you do that? And he said, well, it just seems like that's what I should do. And it wasn't anything other than that. I mean, that's how he looked at it. Well, it just seemed like that's what I should do. And I thought, well, this is brilliant. He doesn't really have any musical training whatsoever other than, just a whole street garage kind of approach to playing. But he's got the thing that all the musicians need to have, and that's like a intuitive sense of, like what to do and where to go with things, So he's a complete seat of your pants kind of a dude, and he's a joy, man. I mean, we've had so many great years playing together, and it just works.
I was gonna ask you. Congratulations. You just had another child. I don't know how old they are.
That's been a while back now, but
but I guess my question is, you brought up this thing that my thesis. I'm obsessed with my thesis, obviously, but it's the idea of you're talking about street scholar versus academia, and I am like you just talked about Rocco and all the intuition, the garage, the experiential learning, the gut bucket approach. How would you? How would you? Is it a son, by the way? Is your son? Is it a boy?
Yeah.
So I mean, how do you think is best to navigate as he gets older? I mean, because the lack of propensity of venues to play at and the opportunity. I mean, the questions you guys were asking each other are questions younger people are afraid to ask. Why did you do that? Why? Questions like why. People are afraid if they don't know the answer. They should be, and that's the thing that was so beautiful about the brotherhood was that you guys were asking questions and opening yourselves up to being vulnerable. But it didn't matter because you were going to be met with warmth either way. It was like your boy that I need to interview, forgive me, the guy in Vegas, the drummer. It's like you guys were just talking and you knew you weren't going to get come back with some sort of insult that you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, how do you think... How would you? What kind of advice would you give your son as you raise him in the music world of today?
I would just say live your life and be yourself. I mean, that's really, if you're going to look at the current landscape, you'll say, shit, I'm not doing that. But that's, I think, every generation is faced with that. They'll look and say, how can I make this work? It's the artist's life. Every time it's very difficult when you attach a paycheck to art. It's the age-old thing. I mean, hundreds of years ago, there were patrons of the arts, and they would support, all the classical composers and artists and all of that stuff. You had, rich people that financed them, So we don't have that today. In some ways you do, I guess, but, you just have to forget about that. It's art. There's no guarantees that you're going to be able to feed yourself with art. And so if you're one of those people who is committed to what you're doing and you want to find a way to do it, there will be a way to do it. That's how it always works. History has shown us that. So, I think that all the generational things, the basic, landscape is always the same. It's always been the same. Look at all the, if you look at Michelangelo and all those great artists from, Renaissance painters and, all the great art even that was created in Italy, you go there to see. I mean, come on. Yeah. Pretty phenomenal. No, what's different about that than there is today? We have the San Francisco music scene. You have all the great, the New York scene. You have this and that. And then, come on. I mean, it's just generational. There's, cosmetic differences, but the basic thing is still there. It's art. And so you have to pursue your art where it takes you.
Did you ever get a chance to head up to Mickey Hart's barn with guys like Rico and Zakir Hussain and just play music for days at a time?
Well, Mickey and I have known each other for like years and years and years. When Tower Power first album came out on Warner Brothers Bump City, we did our press release party at the Grateful Dead Ranch up in Nevada.
Oh, cool.
And they dosed all the food with acid. That's a true story.
I mean, I'm laughing because I completely believe it. I mean, I know it's true, but I just can't. So you're telling me like press people were there and eating, and everyone was just
everybody's getting like shit faced,
oh,
and realized that they dosed the food, and but then later on I became a part of Mickey's band. I was in Planet Drum for a couple of years with Zakir, and it was a pretty amazing experience.
When you were just starting out, actually, it was I guess a Fillmore show that caught the attention of Bill Graham, who, like you said, it's generational, and there really only has been one Bill Graham, and only will be one Bill Graham, and he.
God bless him, absolutely.
Because I mean that guy was, when I talked to Howard Wales the first time, he talked about Bill's philosophy was, I want to put this stuff in your face because I want you to dig it. I want you to get into it. Whether it was you put Garibaldi, you put Tower Power, Malo, and the Grateful Dead on the same bill, and you're walking out of there and your ears are wide open. I don't care what So to me, and then of course I'm the off the track Social Lubrication, which is on East Bay Grease on the San Francisco label. That was a Bill Graham label. So I mean that is the other part of it is. You guys have the reason I even can relate to you guys at all is that you have identities, and you had identities because there was a commerce-based record industry. When Bill, how did the band deal with it? It was all sort of like all for one for all. He just said let's cut an album, and that was it. You were gone.
Well, Uncle Chief, my voice is changed. The band got their record deal on a Tuesday night gig at the Fillmore that was called Sounds of the City. And it was like kind of a battle of the bands sort of thing. And that's how the Tower got their first record deal. They were on the verge of breaking up. This was about a year or so before I joined them.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the prizes was a record deal with Bill's labels. He had San Francisco Records and Fillmore Records, one distributed by Columbia, one distributed by Atlantic. And so we, the band won this record deal, and the producer that they were signed to, David Rubinson, told them that your drummer has got to get it together, or we'll give him 6 months or whatever, and if nothing changes, then we're going to you're going to have to get a new drummer for if you want to record.
Absolutely,
make this recording. So the drummer was Emilio's brother Jack. So it was kind of tough for him to have to fire his brother.
Cut ties, yeah, sure.
It was pretty rough, and so we were on Bill Graham's label, San Francisco Records. That was the one that was distributed by Atlantic, and I joined the band in July of 1970, July 23rd, actually, and we recorded in September. That was a live recording, and then. East Bay Grease was done live with a few little overdubs, and then we released it in November. So it was pretty fast.
Well, I got to go, but you said something interesting. So Emilio, I mean, that's his own personal thing with his brother, but so who hipped you to did Conti bring you? How did you get hip to the band?
Well, as I said earlier, the Mick Gillette and Skip Mesquite, who were horn players in the band, they used to come and sit in with that Reality Sandwich band over in Oakland that I was playing with, and they invited me, asked if I was interested in coming to check out the band. they had this band called Tower of Power, and they were playing a gig that I went to at the Keystone Corner in San Francisco, which was kind of this rock club, at that time, which became a very, very famous jazz club in San Francisco.
Yeah, I've interviewed Todd Barkin. So yeah, but that was before he took over that club. It was more of a rock place.
It was a rock place, and there was the Keystone Berkeley, and there was the owner was a guy named Freddie Herrera. And so we worked he had another Keystone Palo Alto. I had like 3 different venues here, in the Bay Area. But the Keystone Corner in San Francisco over on Vallejo Street was that was the original one, And so, we went to hear him in there. And I knew I was going to be in it from the first second I heard him. I knew I was going to be in it even before I had met anybody.
Really?
Yeah, I just knew it had me written all over it. It was everything that I wanted in music when I heard them.
Can you talk about what you wanted in music at that time?
I'm in it. Tower of Power.
But I mean, as far as I wanted
to be in a band with horns. I mean, when you're 23 years old, I mean, you kind of have, your sort of ignorance is bliss,
Absolutely.
I wanted to be in a band like that. I wanted to be in a band with horns. I wanted to play funky music. I wanted to express myself musically. I wasn't really interested in anything else other than that. I didn't even think about how I was going to make a living. I just wanted to play music, And so my whole thing was that, just wanting to be in a band and make music. So that's what I did. I got to join them, and it was the best thing I ever did, in my professional life. That was be a member of that band.
That's gorgeous. No, because it was it's a part of our musical lexicon that can never be replicated. But when you guys first started the Keystone Corner, the cops were right there. The cop station was right there, I think. And what were some of the venues? Were you going to Palo Alto and playing with these guys? There's
the Palo Alto venue was later on as Freddie expanded, because he had that small club, and that was very successful. And then it went from there over to the Keystone Berkeley, and then he added the place in Palo Alto. The Keystone Berkeley, we used to play there, man, I don't know, it seemed like we played there 1,000 times. It was just, such great music was made in there, and all the bands. I saw Herbie Hancock's Headhunters band in there, the very first one with Harvey Mason playing drums when
Wow.
they very first came out.
Wow.
We used to have jams in there. I mean, it was just really a fun place, And, that was Freddie's thing. I mean, Freddie was just a cool guy, and he loved music. And he was like, kind of to the club thing what Bill Graham was on a larger scale with the concert promoting, big venues. Freddie, was that. There was, the Matrix was another place. There was the Fillmore, of course. There was the Family Dog out on the beach out there in San Francisco at Ocean Beach. There was Pepperland in San Rafael. Berkeley had, what was that place? The Loading Zone was a band, but it was also like I think that was a club too. But there was a bunch of little, places. The Long Branch Saloon was a place in Berkeley. That was it was. We used to play there. Man, we would rock that place. It was so hip. And it was just, there was all these places to play. Going back to what you asked earlier, I mean, there's just tons of stuff.
Talking to David Garibaldi here, I was in a thrift store, and for 25 cents I picked up talk about marketing. This was on the MAI label, a cassette tape from 1988. And we didn't have time to get it transferred, but I wanted you to talk. There's you on the front, and on side one, there's a track called "Grown," like groaning, "Grown Men Counting."
Mm-hmm.
And it's
that's a band called Wishful Thinking.
So talk about, I mean, because that to me, when I crack up every time I'm listening to this stuff, and then a good buddy, a very dear friend of mine, another great drummer, George Marsh, follows you up with the demystifying inner drumming. But how did that all come about?
I was living in L.A. I was approached by the leader, Tim Weston, whose father actually was Paul Weston. His mother was Joe Stafford, a great singer from the 50s.
Absolutely, yeah.
And his father, Paul, was the head of CBS Records for years. And so he wanted to start a band. He approached me about it. I joined up with him and then, some other guys. And we just kind of wanted to have a band, just like you do. It was different in L.A. There was no bands. And so everybody the guys that we got wanted to be in a band. And so we kept the same people for a while and kind of made our music together, and it was cool. We did a lot of gigs and wrote a lot of cool music, and it was cool.
I couldn't help but notice on East Bay Grease, David Garibaldi plays drums and also vibes, and I mean vibes. It's an instrument that is sort of gone by the wayside because with rock palettes it's more of an intimate kind of thing, but. Did you you mentioned all the Herrera, all these great jam clubs, but how about Garibaldi at the Visadero or the Both And, or were you playing any like Cal Jader stuff at any point either before? I mean, even if Tower was never.
No, the Both And all those were like, excuse me, those were jazz venues, and so there were. That was kind of still at a time where the venues were sort of separate. They became. You could go to places after that and hear all kinds of different styles of music, but there were places that were specifically rock clubs, specifically jazz clubs. It wasn't this big mix of music like it became.
So the closest thing, I mean, I'm just trying to get the closest thing. I want to get all the little tidbit, the reality sandwich. But was there anything? The closest thing you got to jazz playing was with Tower of Power, or did you ever go in the direction of just kind of?
No, my first gigs with making money were with a big band, the Sid Reese Big Band over here on the east side of the Bay where I live now, and so those were that was like the first music that I played out, made money with, was playing big band jazz, So I always loved that kind of music. I listened to it all the time. I loved jazz music. When I was growing up, that's kind of how you had credibility, was if you were a jazz musician. Being a rock musician, all that stuff, that was, that was vulgar. I mean, it was just, it wasn't anything,
right.
Not what it became. And so when I started playing with Tower, and kind of like those years right before Tower, when I decided that I wanted to kind of go into playing funk and R&B music, but use all of the things I was learning from other things, kind of fuse some things together, that was sort of at the cusp of when that was happening. You could sort of, guys were making decisions as to where they were going to go musically, which direction things were going to go. And so for me, I wanted to fuse things together, and that was my thing. All the guys that I played with, that's what we did.
As we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you if when you head out to the Musical Instrument Museum, and you guys are coming here on the 20th in Phoenix. I'm in Tucson, but in the 20th. Aside from the music, do you plan on doing? How should I say this? Talking to the audience a little bit. I mean, I feel like we've lost a couple of generations of younger cats because of the digital age. I mean, a lot of people. How do you get across the essence of 44 years of Tower of Power? I think in today's society, you mentioned listening before, and we don't listen as well as we used to because all you had to do before was use your imagination. You said that. It was very eloquent. So beyond the music, how do you educate audiences now about the significance, the longevity, and the mysticism of Tower of Power?
We don't really kind of do anything like that. We present our music. We just play our music. That's what we do. It's kind of a fun experience for people. And, Tower fans are, they're unique. And, they come to party, and that's what we do. We have a big party. We don't really do nostalgia. We don't do, this is what it was when we were, 25 or, we just play our music. We don't look at it like some sort of, let's hit people to, the era that we came up in. Now we do clinics as a band. We do clinic presentations and, talk about the history of the band, how we put our music together. That sort of stuff. We've done some of those. We don't do them, often, but, a few times a year. And those are pretty cool.
And what do those look like? I mean, do you have a lot of younger cats, and it's wide open?
Yeah, we did a really great one last year in Minneapolis at a music school there, McNally Smith, and it was really, really good. They have a great performance venue in there, and we were playing at the Dakota Jazz Club. And one of the afternoons, we went over to this music school and did a little presentation, and we played our music and kind of, you dissect the music, you play the grooves, you kind of explain how it's built, the thought process that went into it. We play sections of songs. We don't play, maybe we'll play a song all the way through, but, most of it is just designed to kind of dissect kind of what, we are. So you get to talk the personalities, talk to people from each section. Everybody talks a little bit, talks about their contribution to the music, what their role in the band is, because that's really, if you're going to have a band, everybody's got a pretty defined role as to what they do to make the music happen. We're the sum of our parts. The star of a Tower Power show is the music. It isn't an individual, although, every spot in the band is filled with a guy who is just awesome. And, that individual contribution contributes to, the total Tower Power music thing, So the star of our show is our music. And people that come into the band to play with us, that's what's expected of them. We're not looking for, it's great individual solo performers. We're looking for people that can, integrate themselves into what we do, buy into our concept, and play the piss out of it. Mm-hmm. And then when it's time for them to shine, point to them. They step to the front of the stage, they do their thing, and then they go back to, to their spot. I mean, that's how we do it.
Did you ever get a chance to play with Coke Escovedo at all? Or
yeah.
Can you talk? Because I'm sort of jonesing to see. Do you have a timbale set? Did you bring along too, or did you ever play?
No. I mean, I played all the percussion stuff, but I played drum set. And then like Pete and Coke and Sheila, Peter Michael, the Escovedos. We've known those guys forever. I mean, Pete and Coke were in the Bay Area making music when we first got started. And so we became friendly with them. They, basically are brothers, I mean, we did so many things with them. We played gigs with them. We hung out, just all kinds of stuff. And so, Sheila, I met her when she was 15, and she first started coming out to play with her dad. And then, good friends with Peter Michael and, and Juan and, the whole bunch of them, they're just wonderful people, terrific music people, aside from being great people.
And they knew the roots of their music. That's my point. Is that if they were Latino, or they they knew the Afro-Cuban rhythms, or they knew the bossa rhythms, and they knew where it came from. I mean, and that is also part of it, is that it's not just that it was a mixed race band. It was the fact that people knew their musical roots, and there's an educational process to that as well. And I think that ultimately that's where I lie, is just the opportunity to allow people that live through certain times to be able to talk about this stuff, to create a lineage for my daughters and your kids and anybody else that is interested in listening. Because, when the drum machine came in and, the FM radio started to stream down, the days of Can I Dedicate are long gone. And, so I just want to I'm not looking to preserve, but I'm looking to promote those kinds of values, and that to me is, and it's important just to get to as many cats as possible. So thanks so much for taking the time today, man. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure, man. And thank you so much for having me. It was an honor, and hope to see you soon.
Absolutely, brother. Take it easy.
All right, bro. Talk
Later on now. All right.
Bye-bye.
The Jake Feinberg Show. We'll